from 1000 hours to 1300 hours. On the Naga account, and we look for a bit more. Before anything else, former governor of Nagaland, former PIB, for gracing the occasion for the election regarding this. And you also thank the army commander. For giving us all the backing necessary to conduct the event.
बाकी को म्यूट करेंगे
On second scale and the subject itself. And with emphasis on ethnicity and identity, which has led to the problem. Now background, I am Lieutenant General C.R. Mukherjee, a member of the Cabinet Committee of the Center for Eastern and Southeastern Research Studies. Our patron is General Shankar Rajawari. Our president is their Chief Marshal Law, former Chief of Indian Air Force. We have Major General Arun Roy of our organization here. The Toronto Thirdly, again, member of our governing body, and former DG Assam, former DG NSG, and very knowledgeable of the entire issue. Mr. Chaudhary would be introducing the rest of the speakers and reacting as we go. As I said, I'm Lieutenant General Mukherjee. I spent about 60 years with the health people of the North. Either while serving there or with the assignment. I'm married to one, and therefore I understand them very, very well. I live in the Northeast for at least 4 months every year. I personally went Goiva a number of times, Assam a number of times, and we've had big and frank talks. I'll first start with a few words on ethnicity, identity, clans, tribes, race, nationality, with respect. What I'm going to say, most of you don't know anything about, but it's standing. Firstly, there is no such thing as a the term coined by either the Ahums or the British, nobody knows who. The group of that time, all over the Northeast region, were grouped into village states based on family conglomerations. Understand? There were no Anglamis, Guptas, Aos, Semas, or any such groups, any such names. For the simple reason that those names were all coined by the British for purposes of administrative convenience. Same word Naga was used again. But technically now, Government of India has acknowledged 35 about Naga tribes, of which 17 in Nagaland, the rest spread out over Assam, Arunachal, Manipur, and Myanmar. A number of clans, or in other words, villages, or village groups, loosely knit of the tribe. The tribes, as I said, not originally known as the president. They were loosely grouped. After the British came in, the names came about. And what is most important, they brought in Christianity. And they used, when they found it was difficult to weld the tribes and clans together, they used Christianity as a tool to weld all these things together. And it succeeded so well. If anything managed to group people together, was religion. Ethnicity actually means culture, language, and behavioral patterns related to each other. You will find that one village group has no love lost for the other, nor do they speak the same dialect. One village group. And it is even worse when you start talking about tribes. Furthermore, after Nagaland became a state, and prior to that, the so-called Naga tribes, the so-called Naga tribes in Manipur, or for that matter, in Myanmar, Assam, or Telangana, Arunachal, the tribes in Nagaland don't love lost children. Even today, they have no love lost children. Now, this is the group of people that the Naga Court and the government of India are trying to band together through the Naga. In other words, it's a effort more at nation than anything else. Because there has never been a Naga nation. Like you were trying to bring together diverse groups of people with different languages, different dialects, who can't speak to each other except in Nagamese. Whose culture in many ways is different. And as I said, preparing up the Nazi, I had been around 2006. In fact, when I joined the army, I had been Muslim. A few words about the insurgency. I'm from the assembly. MSc and I am ethnically is 94% Kampu and its subtribes. Its leadership is about 90%. Further, when I carried out research as Colonel of the Assembly, I found to my horror that about 90% were the children of ex-servicemen, the majority of whom were from my. Now, that is the group of people who are being called the mother of all inciting groups, and with whom the effort is primarily being signed. That is not being accepted by the other tribes. And if you try to force this accord as to being done, in my view, and I hope I'm wrong, but it's going to happen. I was born in a similar house that in the strategy of strategic stalemate. You look at Dimapur, it's like the Paris of the East. According to this book. Look at Tohiba, again developing very fast. There are things developing without an accord. Why the hell do we need an accord in it? Because the moment we try to enforce the accord, Manipur will be inflamed. Parts of Assam will be inflamed, parts of Arunachal will be inflamed. But I leave that to the court decide as to what they are. But I assure you that we would send in recommendations. They should be there. I would like to hand over to the moderator, Subrata Chaudhary, very much. Everyone, the subject, over friend, over to you. And they don't time. Okay. Listen.
Thank you, General Mukherjee. That was certainly a very dynamic start to today's proceedings. I will take off from what you mentioned about Dimapur having become the Paris of the Northeast. It's true in some ways. It's been 25 years now since the fire signed between the government of India and the NSCM and leadership. An entire generation in Naga has grown up free of the intense stress that was generated by the conflict. And this has come from Naga. Today, action design using the traditional Naga textiles, the handicrafts, and as General Mukherjee just mentioned, you have to taste the confectionery that is available in Dimapur today. We cannot believe how much the last 25 years has transformed Nagaland. It's now Nagaland is a tourist destination. From world over, people come from the Hornbill Festival. Intellectuals and artists from Nagaland are making a mark, both at the national and some of them even at the global level. Is the ceasefire perfect? Far from it. What it has done is end the uncertainty and fear that was triggered by unending conflict soon after Indian independence. It has allowed peace that is a necessary condition for development. It has given room to the younger generation to develop their natural talents. Today, whether Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Kolkata, or even abroad, young Naga boys and girls and others of the millennial generation from across India, they seek jobs and education opportunities with confidence, determined to take the test that life has to offer. All of us, whether in Nagaland, other states, in the Northeast, or other parts of India, look forward to a settlement that addresses concerns of all stakeholders. Today's webinar organized by the Center for Eastern Northeastern Research and Studies, Kolkata, CENERSCAPE, the General Support from Eastern Command, is a humble initiative to explore ideas that will help find a way out of the present impasse. To quote from Ecclesiastes 3, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. We can only join in prayer and hope that now is the time for the solution to develop the promise of a permanent peace, which will take the entire vision to another level of sustainable development. We have an impressive panel of speakers in today's webinar. Naga, for the way forward, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Shama Datta. Not only was he the governor of Nagaland, but in the previous avatar as director of the Intelligence Bureau, he oversaw the early stages of other jobs. We have on the panel Mr. Gopal Pillai, former Union Home Secretary, and more than that, as Joint Secretary Northeast in the NHA, he was one official who did not read 48 files. I think very few have traveled the Northeast as extensively as he had. Mr. Aditya Jameel, former Chief Secretary, Nagaland, both he and Mrs. Jameel are renowned officials who have spent their lives trying to develop Nagaland. Then we have General Khalsa, when I say the first from Northeast region to reach the rank of Lieutenant General in the Indian Army, and currently a member of the Consultative Committee of the Government of Manipur on Naga Peace Rights. We are really fortunate to have in person Mr. Shuri Naumik, who as BBC's East India representative has broken some of the biggest stories from the Northeast region and beyond. He is also working president of the Northeast Policy Alternative. And Mr. Shobhi Kurkaiskar, veteran journalist, will extensively cover conflict in the Northeast. Now, after the speakers share their views, we will have a Q&A session, and I encourage all who are logged in to participate. Those attending virtually are welcome to share their questions on the chat box, even while the speakers are delivering their views. We will take them after all the panels spoken. Without further ado, may I request Mr. Gopal Pillai to deliver the keynote address for today's event. Over to you, Mr. Gopal Pillai.
Can't.
I think you have unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now we can.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Senators, for inviting me to deliver this address on the breaking the deadlock, the Naga Peace Accord, and the way forward. As you all know, the history and dialogue with the Naga people has had a checkered history, starting with the 9-point agreement, the 16-point agreement. Then you had the negotiations with Jayaprakash Narayan, Reverend Michael Scott, then talks on with the government of India, and Indira Gandhi herself intervened. And I always felt that that was the time when we were as close to a deal as possible. And then we had the talks with the 1975 Shillong Accord. And then in 1997, we had the ceasefire peace accord in 1997, which is held to date. Initially, when the negotiations started, I was there as Joint Secretary Northeast in the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Swaraj Kaushal was the first interlocutor. It lasted less than a year. Then Mr. Padmanabhaya came. He was there for almost 10 years. There was also a group of ministers who were assisting him at some point, Mr. Oscar Fernandez and so on. Substantial negotiations to an extent did not really progress during this time, though there was a lot of exchange of views and meetings were held. Late 2009, in June 2009, I became the Union Home Secretary. And in an effort with the political leadership to restart the negotiations that literally with a political understanding, Mr. R.S. Pandey, former Chief Secretary of Nagaland, and one who we knew was trusted by all sides, was appointed as the interlocutor, and he took charge in February 2010. During the next 14 months, negotiations took place. The NSE and IM, for the first time, formally presented a 30-point, you can't call it a memorandum or charter of demands, starting from sovereignty and so on. And these were discussed, and both in the Ministry of Home Affairs as well as with the Cabinet Committee on Security, and negotiating briefs were given to the interlocutor, Mr. R.S. Pandey. I think the negotiations took place during that time with great respect, mutual respect on both sides, honor, and so on. And there was substantial progress. And to an extent, I could say that we had reached almost about 95% agreement on most of the demands. I'm just going to mention for about 5 minutes in terms of what really took place during those negotiations, because it's important to understand the background and if you want to look at the way forward. Discussions were held by the interlocutor, then he brought back demands and discussions and modified proposals, etc., and which were taken back through the MHA to the Cabinet Committee on Security. Some were accepted, some were asked to be renegotiated, and so on. And at the end of June 2011, when I left as the Union Home Secretary, we had almost reached agreement to a number of issues. And let me just mention some of the main issues out of the 30 points, but the main issues, one was on the issue of sovereignty. The issue was discussed in great length on the concept of what was called shared sovereignty between center and state. Mr. Muiva himself brought in a constitutional expert from the Netherlands to come and assist the NSE and to understand this concept of shared sovereignty. This constitutional expert actually met us, met Mr. Pandey, met me, met the Union Law Secretary, and so on, and came back into a great understanding of what shared sovereignty we had in the Indian Constitution. And I think he sort of conveyed to Mr. Muiva that this concept of shared sovereignty was something that could be accepted by the Nagas. And therefore, we went ahead in that concept of shared sovereignty. Having accepted that, there were a number of detailed issues which went into some of the subjects which were in the concurrent list. Could they be transferred to the state list and so on? There was discussions, the agreement on what could be transferred and so on and so forth. So that shared sovereignty concept became, in one sense, the bedrock on which the rest of the negotiations moved forward. The second issue was on the territorial integrity of all Naga areas. And with the objections from Manipur, Assam, and Arunachal Pradesh on any deviation from the existing state borders, alternate proposals were put forward. And one of them was what we called as a Naga Regional Council, which would oversee the religious, cultural, traditional, and ethnic identities of Nagas all over India. It would get grants from the Government of India, and this would be a completely pan-Naga body, to an extent, if you might call it, on the model of the SGPC, which Sikhs had, but similar type of model, which is on an all-India basis. For the autonomy for the hill districts of Nagaland, there were a number of issues which were discussed in view of the sixth schedule being adopted for the Naga hill districts in Manipur. And detailed discussions took place to an extent that we were discussing the issue was final point with many other agreements on everything else was whether appointment of the collectors and the SPs of the districts, which finally the state government said that appointment of collector and SP is something which has to be with the state government, but we are willing to consult with the district councils before we appoint the district collector and the SP. I'm just mentioning that to say how detailed and close the negotiations were. Number of other issues which came up on the concept of permanent residents of Nagaland, which were agreed upon, the rights over the land and resources over the land, which were clarified and agreed upon. There were issues on the rehabilitation of armed cadres of the Naga groups, there was agreement on how they would be rehabilitated, those that would be given a specific cash compensation because they would not be perhaps old enough, they're not too old to get into the regular forces, and others who would be absorbed into the state police or separate battalions which would be created and so on. These negotiations went on in great state. There was, of course, I must say that when I say these broad agreements, like in all negotiations, nothing is agreed upon till final agreement is reached. So it's both sides knew that, but this was the way it was progressing to an extent where we could say that we were almost at the closing stages. Post 2011, the negotiations continued with Mr. R.S. Pandey for 2 years. Of course, then Mr. R.S. Pandey resigned because he went to contest the elections in Bihar, became an MLA in Bihar, and Mr. R.N. Ravi was appointed as the interlocutor. Negotiations still progressed, continued, and in 2015, partly because of the pressure of the ill health due to ill health of Isaac Sue, and the keenness of the NSCNIM to have an agreement with the signature of Isaac Sue also on it, the framework agreement was concluded. We didn't have anything of substance in it, but it did mention recognition of the unique history of the Nagas and the fact that the discussions were taking place with respect, honor, and all that. No substantive details, which I mentioned earlier, were mentioned in the framework agreement. And Mr. Isaac Sue himself signed the framework agreement in the ICU, from which a few days later he actually passed away. To an extent, I think this was the best opportunity that was there during that period, 2015. There was great respect and mutual understanding between the teams, both sides. But for some reason, which I have not really been able to understand or even take grasp of, between 2015 and 2019, the detailed negotiations to clinch the deal did not take place. And in a matter, things were allowed to drift. And then in 2019, in August 2019, a development took place, which all of you know. It was the revocation of Article 370 of the Indian Constitution and the bifurcation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into 2 union territories. The bifurcation of the state into 2 union territories took place without even the consent of the state legislature because it was under President's rule at that time. This decision of the Government of India undermined the entire basis of what I may call as the shared sovereignty which had been agreed upon between the 2 sides. Because there was no shared sovereignty if one side could make the other side a zero. A state government could be made into a union territory and disappear if the central government so decided. So this whole concept of shared sovereignty, on which the negotiations had progressed to almost, shall I say, almost completion, that foundation collapsed. And then subsequently, the government, I think in its non-understanding of how the situation of the interlocutor works, also made the interlocutor the governor of Nagaland. And then you know what statements were made and issues came up, which vitiated the entire atmosphere for the talks. And as a result of which, the interlocutor was finally had to be removed, and a new interlocutor, and the negotiations are sort of restarted in one sense. So this is where we are in one sense of the negotiations, and the NSC and I now looking and saying we want constitution, separate constitution, we want a separate flag, and integration of the Naga areas, which is back to where they were at in the start of the negotiations. Now the issue on the August 19th, 2019 decisions of the Government of India are actually challenged in the Supreme Court. In fact, I'm very surprised that many state governments have yet to challenge that, because it strikes at the very fundamental root of federalism in India. If the central Government of India can make any state into a union territory, it strikes at the very root of federalism. That matter is before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in its wisdom in the last 3 years, has not really taken up the case in spite of a number of mentions being made by various parties, etc. And therefore, this whole issue of what we call it earlier in the List 1 and List 2 in the Indian Constitution is now become very amorphous. And that is one of the reasons why the negotiations, in one sense, are stuck. Because if you don't have shared sovereignty, then what do you have? You want the whole concept of shared sovereignty was a discussion which came, and we were finally able to persuade NSCNM to accept that, and that foundation collapsed. And therefore, I'm hoping that in one sense, I think the government of Nagaland, the government of Manipur, other state governments should actually all treat themselves as a party in the state in the Supreme Court, and get a decision from the Supreme Court on what I call as the shared sovereignty back, which is the pillar of the Indian Constitution. List 1 and List 2 of the Indian Constitution had shared sovereignty in it. So, in one sense, we are basically, I think you will really not see any progress until you see the Supreme Court finally delivering this verdict saying that we restore the concept of shared sovereignty between the center and the states. Because if you don't have this concept of shared sovereignty, then at least in my opinion, I think the negotiations with the NSCNM are going nowhere. So that is the first, I think my first point on the way forward, I think, is for parties to implicate themselves in the Supreme Court to finally get the Supreme Court to take a decision. I know it is very clear. I am at least certain that the decision to bifurcate the state into 2 union territories without the consent of the state is a totally illegal, unconstitutional, and will be declared ultra-vires. The government of India also knows that, which is why they say that at the appropriate time, we'll restore statehood. But so long as till they restore statehood, in the concept of a Supreme Court saying that this is ultra-vires, it cannot be at the beck and mercy. The states cannot be existing at the mercy of the central government. No central government which has a 2/3 majority or even a simple majority can decide that a state will exist or not exist. I think that is the basic principle in the federal structure of the Indian Constitution, which has to be restored, and it can be restored only by the Supreme Court. So that is one basic element which I think, insofar as the government is concerned, government of India is concerned, from what I understand, they've done the delimitation for the union territories. The delimitation commission report is out. They are now doing the electoral rolls for the union territories. The elections are proposed in either 2023 or 2024. So I'm not really looking forward to anything unless the central government decides to change its stand, move for the Supreme Court, get a decision whichever way, and then decide to move forward. The Naga talks are, in one sense, stuck in this limbo. I don't think the issue of a state flag is really all that important. I personally feel, and I think during our time, we could always give a state flag provided it is subordinate to the national flag, which is a concept which everybody understands. So I don't think that's the real problem. There are other states which have state flags also, and those are not really an issue. There are also 2 other issues which I would just like to flag as, while we are in this waiting period of negotiations, and Supreme Court decision will take time because it is already before the Constitution bench. It only has to be constituted and start hearing the cases. There are issues of what I call as the Manipur land and autonomy issue. I think this issue in Manipur, which is very critical in one sense to get a consensus in Manipur towards a Naga peace accord, is very important. And therefore, simultaneously, now that today you have a central government and the state governments all in the same party, it behoves this, if you can move the central and state governments to start discussing on some of these issues and see whether you can find a local consensus on this issue of land and then the autonomy. I think the autonomy part of it is more or less settled. I think the land issue is something which is very, very critical in terms of finding a solution which is finally acceptable broadly to the entire state of Manipur. So this is one issue which they will have to discuss internally. There are other issues within Nagaland itself, the issue of what I call as reconciliation, the issue of finding peace within the tribes. There is the history of some bad blood within the tribes, how they will, that process of reconciliation has already started. That discussion is going on, and I think I have to thank the people of Nagaland for that. They've taken, the civil society there has taken a great amount of initiative, and that process of reconciliation is on, and that process of reconciliation has to be discussed further to an extent that when it comes, any decision which is agreed upon now will have to be also agreed upon by everybody. You cannot have in the past, like in the past, where you have an agreement and then a splinter group breaks away and says, we don't agree with the decision and we continue with our insurgency or whatever it is. So you need a broad consensus where everybody literally signs on the white paper on the agreement and says, we all agree that this is finally the best deal that we could negotiate with the government of India, and we all agree to this and put a final end to this chapter. This is one concept which I'm just putting forward this. This is essential to find a lasting peace to this area. The very fact that the peace talks have continued for more than 25 years without any major incident, I think, as was mentioned earlier, it has brought some element of stability. It brought some element of peace. It brought some element of development to the people in Nagaland. And as somebody mentioned, the Nagaland of 1947 is not the Nagaland of 2022. You have tremendous, what I call as explosion of talent and entrepreneurship, both within Nagaland as well as those who have gone out of Nagaland and moved across, not just within India, but also abroad and become top fashion designers, top artists, top entrepreneurs all across the world. And that has meant a tremendous amount of self-confidence within Nagaland. And apart from facts that you have, some of the most distinguished writers in India today, the late Temsula Ao is possibly a shining example of that. So we see this whole society in churn as well as in trying to find so in my opinion, just to recapitulate before I end, is that you need to get a decision of the Supreme Court restoring the concept of shared sovereignty, which means the decision of the government of India to make Jammu and Kashmir into 2 union territories has to be declared ultra vires the constitution and statehood restored there, and to get statehood, that means the statehood, the power remains with the shared sovereignty, remains with the states. This is very essential, because without that, I think the basis on which we've negotiated for the last 50 years really goes away. And I think that will be the first step toward then moving forward. I'll stop here. Thank you.
And you focused, I think, quite rightly on the concept of the shared sovereignty and the Supreme Court decision on the Article 370 applications may perhaps form the beginning of a new chapter in talks. We also talked about Manipur and hopefully general something will bring that in. Now, so we save questions for the, when all the speakers have spoken, that's already. We will keep questions for after all the speakers have spoken, if that's already with you.
Questions at the end, yeah. Questions at the
Yeah.
end, yes.
Okay.
Right, so then we'll ask Mr. Jamil if he has anything up. We'll ask Mr. Jamil to speak update.
Yeah.
Mr. Mr. Jamil,
Yes.
good morning, welcome.
Yeah. Good morning.
It's a privilege that you are here with us today. And
Yeah.
we've already introduced you and we've given, I don't know if you mentioned how you and Mr. Jamil have devoted your life to the people of Nagaland, who have done so much for district level administration. And it's amazing, you never sought to go to Delhi or anywhere else. You just focus on the people of Nagaland and make the best that you could for them. Also, I will not waste much time, but I will hand over the floor to you for you to share your views on the Naga board and possible ways forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, seniors, for giving me this opportunity, and a warm welcome to all the listeners over here. And I think today the basic focus is on the accord, to the solution or the settlement that the Nagas have been talking about for all these years. Now, I'd like to thank Mr. G.K. Pillai for his knowledgeable expressions of all the observations that he has made during the course of this. And of course, about the shared sovereignty and autonomous and those issues, I will not touch upon, because these are things which actually don't make much sense to us at the moment. We are mainly focusing on the issue of settlement. Now, before we come to the issue of settlement, I would like to focus a little on genesis. How and where and why the Naga movement has sprung up. Now, Mr. Pillai has talked about 1947. At that time, the Naga, 60, 70 years ago, we were just simple, very primitive tribals. And the only thing outstanding about them was their love for freedom. And they had no knowledge whatsoever about sovereignty, independence, nationalism, and the 17th century European concepts. And the few of the leaders started goading them on. The Naga Club and others came out, this peaceful movement. But then suddenly there was a mishandling by the Assam police, and then later on the army had to be called in because it was made into a very big insurgency movement. And Armed Forces Special Powers Act was imposed, which I think is not the very correct thing, but still it is being continuing since 1958. And the whole thing has blown up into a full-scale so-called insurgency, and the people have been suffering, in untold violence and miseries. Now, the basic point about this is that the Naga tribe don't know actually the meaning of sovereignty, national independence, or shared sovereignty. They would like to have a bit of freedom, the love of fresh air, the countryside, the thing. That is the freedom which they aspire. Now, we should keep that in mind as we talk about the settlement. In 1964, when the first ceasefire was signed with between the government of India and the Naga insurgents, that time the position was very clear. They had signed the paper, and then they had laid down the arms. That things were kept in the ceasefire locations, and then things were very clear. In the last about 20-25 years, things have moved very smoothly. But in 1997, when Mr. I.K. Gujral had announced the ceasefire, there was not even a scrap of paper on which you could talk about the ceasefire. I.K. Gujral announced in the parliament, and then Mr. Dr. Jamir was asked to give a press conference. And then when we had asked for the ground rules or the papers on which there was nothing, so it was it was not at all. I don't think it was at all a ceasefire. And Mr. Pillai will remember, he had come after a few months to Nagaland to try to talk about the ground rules. State government was willing to accept it, but we had been left out of the ceasefire, and it was between the government of India and the undergrounds. So this ceasefire was actually a non-operational ceasefire. And that is, it is on that basis that the talks have been going on as equal entities and then the state government out of the scene. 25 years have passed, and now we are told that there is a framework agreement signed in 2015, and there was the agreed position signed in 2017. Now, it's all very good, but the first point is that the Nagas, the vast majority of the Nagas have not been consulted, not been referred to, not been asked anything, excepting what the NSC and IM and the other Naga groups are discussing. Now, we have to also understand that, the NSC and IM, the insurgents, they are maybe 3, 4, 5,000 armed militants, maybe about 10, 15,000 collaborators. Well wishes maybe many, but active people maybe about 10, 20,000 in a population of 20 lakhs of Nagaland and other. It's hardly coming to about 1% of the Naga population. It's not that everybody contributes to their thinking and their way of living. So now this the framework agreement has been signed and agreed position have been signed, and what we are understanding is that from what we gather from whatever paper is slightly distributed among the people, we have the Naga people are understanding this, that they have given up sovereignty. They have gone for shared sovereignty. So shared sovereignty, whatever way you may explain, you may think about it, but they have given up sovereignty as such. They have gone for shared sovereignty. And then that may be decided by the Supreme Court, but they have given up on sovereignty. The second aspect is they have given up on the integration of the greater Naga limb, as they call it, and the states have to exist according to the constitutional boundaries adopted by the nation. So now there has been actually no flag and no constitution has been talked about in the framework agreement. We are worried about this because new things keep on developing, and so we get the idea that they're thinking that the whole dialogue process, negotiation process is cover up for the undergrounds to go on living their own lives. Here, Mr. Jamir and all of us, we feel that if there's no integration, if the Manipur Nagas are to stay in Manipur and Nagas of Nagaland are to have a thing, then again, Mr. Muiba, who is one of the citizens of Manipur, actually has no right to talk about Nagaland as a state. And whatever is to be discussed now, we feel that since they have agreed to no integration, no Nagalim, the settlement actually more or less it is settled. And then the rest of the underground, like in the NNPGs, the Naga National Political Workers, 8 groups, they have come together as a NNPG. And then they have also signed the agreed position. And then whatever it may be, it will be acceptable to the Nagas. Nagas, as I started in the beginning, they only want some freedom. Not in the sense of the 17th century European concept of nationalism, sovereignty, dependence, but freedom, they will be left alone as a people. And within that, if that freedom is provided as per a 16-point agreement, the creation of the state of Nagaland and all, any kind of settlement will be acceptable in the current situation of no sovereignty and no integration. So 25 years have gone by. And Mr. Pillai has talked about the progress made by the Naga youth. They're all aspiring to be something. They're aspiring to be citizens of the world as per the globalized world that we know today. And then everything is tied up. You open up a small pawn shop. Before you sell a first pawn, first bidi, they come and tax you. And that is what is throttling the Naga society. And then there's a big awareness, a vast majority want solution at peace at any cost, and they don't understand why the whole thing is being delayed. And it will be good if government of India could take this settlement seriously. They have given up. And there's been no coercion. It has been, they have signed it free will, on their free will. And since there have been no coercion, they signed it on free will. The later talks about flag and constitution, people in Nagaland are asking what constitution and all that flag they have seen, whatever flag they're having. But then on this issue, when there is the general agreement, the settlement should be brought about quickly. And the desires and the wishes of this Naga youth, the thousands of them who are there, 40, 50,000 of the Naga youth are working outside Nagaland, as far as Chennai and other places. They have been working, and then they have during the COVID, they have come back 40, 50,000. And we know what is the extent to which the Naga people are there working in the other parts of the country. And there's a much larger population than the NSC and IM with their guns. So that is one. The final issue which I would like to point out is that there, even within the NSC and IM, the Nagas of Nagaland, we are told that they will openly endorse whatever is agreed between the government of India and government of within the Naga thing, provided it is put into place. And instead of that, if the government of India plays other games, like for example, right now there's a lot of talk about Eastern Nagaland asking for statehood. Then ultimately the statehood, both Nagaland and the Eastern Nagaland, Frontier Nagaland as a colony, will be brought down to Union Territory status. This would create much more confusion in the minds of the people. So keeping Nagaland together and then coming to an agreement would be the right thing for the government of India to do. And as I've said, we have accepted the unique Naga history, whatever it means, but it would mean that the Naga political problem will continue. But then it would, it can be talked about by people, but at least it can be controlled. It can be under control like it had been done by the 1964 agreement. So in short, I would like to urge upon the government of India to quickly make a decision for a settlement in whatever form. The Nagas are wanting it, they need it, they have not questioned whatever is there in the framework agreement, nor in the agreed position, but they want a settlement. And therefore, government of India, it's up to the government of India. And I think the NSC and IM also owes it to the people to have a quick understanding. So thank you.
The insight that you have provided from the state, essentially, it's you focus on the love of freedom. The people of Nagaland, that is a priority for them. And you mentioned that more complicated concepts like shared sovereignty or the flag or the constitution don't really impact much on the public psyche. And you have also said that the people of Nagaland want early settlement, the main issues are there. So I think the question and answer, I'm sure there are many questions that will be directed to you. So we will wait for that for any other clarification that the audience and participants may have. Now, may I request David Hansam Singh to speak on behalf of Manipur, people of Manipur, and what their concerns are. David Singh. David Singh, I used to run you.
Can you hear me?
And now we can. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Jai Hind. I was listening very carefully about what Mr. Jamir had to say, and this perspective of Mr. Jamir was really, hearing from him was very, very interesting and a very, very important input, I thought. The topic or the idea given to me is the perspective from Manipur. Going back a little, I would like to say that entire issue should be seen in the perspective of national security. And to some extent, the security environment in Northeast India, because Northeast India uh, has many security challenges which contribute to the challenges of national security. As far as the views of states are concerned, I think though it's very important in a federal setup, the views of the state are very extremely important. But I will strongly recommend that the interests, the national interest must supersede all anything as regards national security. But what defines the national security is for the people in the power to decide. First of all, in the next about 9 to 10 minutes that I have, I would like to say that the sense that I get from the people of Manipur, I don't speak on behalf of the government of Manipur right now. The sense that I get is that everyone supports a settlement. Most people support a settlement, and including Naga tribes, non-Naga tribes, the Kukis, the Meiteis, all ethnic groups generally support a settlement because, as brought out earlier by various speakers, times changed. People are looking for livelihood. People are looking for reasonably, respectable life. And Mr. Jamil mentioned about 50,000 people working in the other part of the country. From Manipur, it is close to 2.2 lakh people working outside. So the integration issue is, I think, to me, it appears there is a non-issue. But yes, assimilation issue may be a issue in the quarters in Northeast people, where people consider identity as more important than other form of legal terminologies. So the first point I would like to make is that people want a settlement. A little peculiar story of Manipur is known to everyone who are attending this webinar. But things are changing very fast. You look at Myanmar, you look at Bangladesh, right from Rohingya to Myanmar, coup, alignment, realignment of certain ethnic resistance or ethnic insurgent groups in Myanmar, and with 36 or more tribes in Manipur, most of them having different perspective, different ideas about what Manipur actually is. And add to that, you see the, ST, scheduled tribe, non-scheduled tribe, then you have the hills, the plains, and all kinds of competing, issues that have created. So the environment or the ecosystem here is conducive to a very, very unstable environment, whether you go in for any good or bad settlement. That is a given. But how do we ensure that the good, the such a settlement brings more good than bad? That is what we are here to discuss. Manipur has also been resistant to multiple efforts towards bringing peace, right from historically, if you see, right from ancient days. And at the time of independence, or at the time after the merger of Manipur, Kingdom of Manipur, the issue is more about, I think, the identity issues, as someone brought out. Issue is about the idea of Manipur, because the kingdom recorded history and all that is known to you, so I will not try to repeat that. Article 371C, which is the actual, this thing of the existence of Manipur as a state actually takes out half the powers of Legislative Assembly. To that extent, what Mr. Pillai had mentioned earlier about the shared sovereignty, actually, in the case of Manipur, please understand that shared sovereignty has already been halved. It doesn't exist constitutionally. It is only half the powers of the constitution that this state has. In the backdrop of all this, what do we actually do? I mean, the aim of this webinar is to actually find a way out, and what are the thoughts? So I would like to say that there are more than 30 groups who are already on talks with some kind of a talks with Government of India. Some kind of talks, of which about 23 or 24 are only Kuki-Chin groups, and then some valley-based groups are also already in talks. So I will strongly recommend some kind of holistic, so therefore, this needs to be kept in mind, but no one, actually, I don't think anyone will oppose. And Mr. Pillai had mentioned about this was 6 schedule ideas. In fact, it is an open secret that the Legislative Assembly of Manipur in 2011 or 12, I don't recollect the date, had agreed that 6 schedule with local adjustment. That is what they have said. 6 schedule powers with local adjustment. So that reflects the idea of people of Manipur, to my mind. And besides this, I will say that unless there is a good governance and a very, very effective mechanism for good governance in the states, none of these, any accord is going to work here. When I say good governance, it doesn't mean the entire gamut of governance, but restricted to the benefits of the policies of the government reaching those who need it. So this is what will actually propel the people to believe that yes, the peace actually works in their interest. So I think I have just taken about 10 minutes. So with that, I will end. And if there are any issues, any questions or something, I'll take it at the end. Thank you.
For Manipur, you have brought in a very, very important point when he talks about any solution needing to be inclusive and not just focusing on what are the demands of one group. You talked about culture and why you agreed that the diversity of cultures should be respected. You mentioned that there can be conflicting or a clash of cultures that have to be addressed. Finally, when you talk about delegation of power, you brought up very clearly that further division of states may have their own problems. And finally, you talked about the need for good governance, and that good governance would bring public support for the effort. So now I questioned the first time all the speakers have shared with you. Now I will turn to Shamira Kutaisker to share his views, since she is an expert on conflicts in Mr. Kutaisker.
I'd like to for last 25 years,
उसका मुंह भी ऑन कर स्पीकर माइक ऑन कर
so political parts of all unity that's what we center of the matter to try and all the time to come out of the solution ideas but fail. And this is certainly not a very good advertising. All the most of the federal structure. So The Naga problem to large extent, so the making of that unity of our more and more unity. Large extent, the Naga is now the victim of that unity. Any symbolic and even a symbolic assertion of subnationalism is a threat to overwhelming the central power.
What means it?
It's signing of the agreement. It being delayed because of the alliance demand of separate peg in the constitution. So and I'll come to that later on. The problems that we will create this demand. But before that, the Naga Nation political group comprising 7 million outfit that has also joined the peace process. In the meantime, has already completed negotiation with the government of Kenya. They have been waiting prepared for since October 2019. The negotiation is there that we had. We completed the negotiation with the government of Kenya. And now the pressure is mounting for an early solution to the problem. And there are also, suggestions that the NSA line be left out and the government should go ahead and sign and pact with the NNPT. And now, other than the Nagaland deputy chief minister is the vice attempt had been made addressing the gathering of people tribal organization. And completely he led this. You are not really and he had eager work on than what we had. So that is one option. My mind is that option is actually not with failure and it will be repetition of the past mistakes. Because in the past, we have seen how the agreements were signed, leaving aside the main product is, and we actually failed to bring the lasting solution. For instance, the 16-point statehood agreement. That was one of the fantastic agreements which had given Nagaland, which had given a special territory status. And even in the initial days, Nagaland was under external FMDs. So that kind of the advantages were given. But we had that three lasting peace, primarily because the main protagonists were left. And if again we do the same thing, if NSA has many years suggested, then left out and an agreement we signed with the NNPT, I think that will again will bring us back to the same problem. And now about the current review about the constitution and the flag. This is clearly after the development in Kashmir, now it has clearly become very difficult for the government of India to concede to the NSA Line's demand. Because it will nullify their narrative of Bihar and Nishan that has been painstakingly crafted and pushed by the countries by the last 4 years. So, definitely they will not like that. And on the other hand, for the NSA IMT, these are, they too had similar compulsion to hold on to this ruling demand. Because it will give some symbolic legitimacy to its concept of shared sovereignty, which the has dwelt on at length. All the years they have been rejecting the past takeouts of the ground that they had failed to secure Naga sovereignty. And now, go back to their core audience. They need to show something. And that flag, and of course, that is not mentioned as my old friend Anandal Sinamit has mentioned. It was not referred in the this framework agreement. We have one page agreement which referred anything. But on the referred about the shared sovereignty and NSCL, I have to view this flag and a symbol, flag and the constitution as the symbol of that shared sovereignty. That's why they are holding on to it. So the best way to break the lockdown that both the concerning parties now need to show some flexibility, maybe some give and take, and the same time which aside they demand for maybe constitution, government of India also make some kind of concession here. That is one way to go forward. But with that, bring lasting peace to the region, and particularly the Naga integrated areas. That is unlikely. Because even if this agreement is signed, the way it is now, the negotiation went on and based on the state framework agreement and the issues they have now discussed and it is decided, it's unlikely because unless the peace gives substantial political and economic autonomy to the Nagas living outside the present states of monarchy and for the Nagas inhabiting the eastern part of the state. One is Nagas living outside Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and another for the Nagas within the Nagaland, who are inhabiting the eastern part of the states. The districts like Mon, Prinsan, Kirpe, and all these places. Because this eastern part of the state, and my previous speakers have said how Nagaland has developed and all these things, but this fruit of development has not really reached at these eastern districts. And they have fallen behind the rest of the state in overall development. And Mr. Jamil has already mentioned the Eastern Nagaland People's Organization, ENP, which is the apex body of the tribes inhabiting the eastern districts of the state, have called for a boycott of the Nagaland Assembly election scheduled for February next year, which is demanding a separate state called, they have called it Frontier Nagaland, comprising 6 districts of Mon, Tuesan, Longland, Samapur, and Nokta. These districts are home to 7 major Naga tribes, namely Koyan, Chang, Santam, Himalayan, Om, Kir, and Pintu, or earlier they were called Pintu. And importantly, most of the foot soldiers of any Naga military group, be it SNIM or NPT and all these foot soldiers primarily come from these groups. And earlier, General Mukherjee has said 90% of the NSCN cadets are country. Actually, yes. After the 16-point agreement, it was the Nagas outside Nagaland, be it Mr. S.S. Kaplan, who is a heavy Naga from Myanmar, or Mr. Tikalan Muiba, a Tangkun Naga from Manipur. They have really followed this movement. And so, basically, the rights of these Nagas and of course marginalized tribes like Kulakurinya from the Mon region. So it is basically this movement is primarily because of it is primarily their movement, not of the House Alamis and the Semas. They have got enough under the present administrative setup of Nagaland state. And unless the aspirations of these groups are addressed, I think it will be difficult to bring lasting peace in the region. And apparently the NSNI's demand for a regional territorial council under the 6th schedule of the Constitution for Naga inhabited areas outside Nagaland has been kept on the back burner on the promise that it could be taken up at a later stage. So, this kind of unfinished agenda belongs to the play of the militancy government. Already we have seen in Manipur Naga People's Front has made some inroad in the NSCN stronghold of Naga areas of Manipur. the outfit which was formed in, I think, 2013. And it was involved in the killing of the Assam Rifles Colonel, recently and closed one in last year. In November last year. So, so in the NSCN and takes political and economic opportunity for the Naga inhabited areas of Manipur. Group like this will be important. And then carry forward the movement. So at least some concession should be made for the Nagas living outside the premises. This is some sort of autonomy, maybe under six schedule, and which is working fantastically, which is working very well in Assam, in the border areas. But unfortunately, our political class has both the center and the state has some kind of reservation in devolution of power. The center doesn't want to give more power to the state. State doesn't want to give power to the smaller groups and all. So, they don't want to pass on the power to the district council and all. So this kind of rigid approach will not bring lasting solution. In my mind, there has to be more flexibility, and and the cooperative federalism needs to be approved to find a lasting solution. I like it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. You certainly have brought some very fresh ideas. You have mentioned that I'm sideline the NSC and iron is not to the work. He just created yet another way of letting it see. You want to talk about case sovereignty and what symbols the flag symbols of that. And you mentioned that the communities that are left out of the development of Nagaland have to be given a boost. And finally, you mentioned that now the areas outside Nagaland have to be given some economic and other autonomy. I think that was, and you talked about finally a co-preparedness to probably get the opportunity of time to expand more than that we can take it. Finally, we have kept the best for last. This will be Maulik. He will give a regional perspective and perhaps he will go beyond the region. Over to Mr. Subir Maulik.
I will give a larger regional perspective in terms of topic of balance. But to begin with, I will actually say, focus on why the settlement in Nagaland is essential and we can't be even further. Now, in view of the developments in the Himalayas, the worsening relationship with China, we can no longer afford, and my friends in the army will agree, I suppose, if we can no longer afford to deploy large military formations for internal security duties like counter-insurgency operations in North. They have to be deployed on a priority basis to manage borders with China. This is the third way that we invest. The army is in full deployment along with China. Therefore, border roads is required there. Therefore, we have to find a way that the Indian state and its political conflict resolution machinery is in full swing to find internal solutions. And rather than expect that if there is trouble, the army will come. Sorry, no, it's not on. The time has come to think of effectively managing and employing the political conflict resolution machinery available to the Indian state and not leave it to be handled by the army, because the army has other things to do and other priorities to handle, and China is one of them. Number two, we be talking of Look East and Act East and all these issues going on. How does Act East and Look East work? Through Northeast. It can work through the sea, right? But if it has to work through the Northeast, this place has to be a settled region. You can't afford to have Nagas blocking the Mao gate and the main highway into Manipur for 30 days, 40 days, and 50 days, and then expect that Mr. Mukesh Ambani will be sending his orders into Southeast Asia through this highway. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. Yeah, they will rather load it up in one of the shipyards in Pakistan or somewhere down the coast and be done with this look east to northeast. So look east to northeast is only going to work if we find political resolution to outstanding conflicts in this region. And everyone agrees that these conflicts have to be resolved politically. The army has done its bit. They have softened up the the rough edges of this powerful resistance movement. The Naga movement is no longer where it used to be in the 1960s. When batches after batches went to China and came back in the latest one, they brought the self-loading rifle to the subcontinent before the Indian army had it. So let's not forget the military challenge at that point of time, and no, and at present it's not the case. So the army has done its bit to soften up these movements. Now it is for the politicians and the administrators to sort it on the table. You brought them to the table. If you can't sort it out in 25 years, it's not a terrific commentary on the state of your state 16-point and the Shillong Accord. The failure to find a final, complete resolution to the Naga issue has defied us despite 25 years of negotiation, primarily because of two reasons. One is the incomplete nationality formation of the Nagas. Yeah? The tribalism is still a huge factor. General Mukherjee is right that Naga nationality formation process is an incomplete process. The Naga leaders who fought against the Indian state, through the armed resistance, trying to create this nationalism as they went along, fighting the Indian state. Sometimes worked, but more often than not, it didn't work because the tribal fissures of problems within, the divides within, surface time and again, and we have seen that not only in the way the Naga organizations have functioned, but also the peace process. So we had the Shillong Accord in which certain Naga tribes came out and signed and backed the Naga federal government at that point of time. But okay, PhD. There were other tribes who said, oh, this is the betrayal of the Naga cause. Suppose we one of them. So this incomplete formation of the Naga nationality formation process is one of the major reasons why it's so difficult to find a solution. And the other is the complete confusion that has been sweeping around at our own central decision-making process. Is that sometimes we try to address the Naga as a homogeneous identity, as was said before, that by General Mukherjee, that for administrative convenience, let's treat the Naga as a homogeneous unit. But then, when we face this armed resistance, very powerful armed resistance, there was always the tendency to play on the tribal device, in which our own agencies did their bit. Problem is, as we've seen in Israel, it always helps to divide a powerful armed resistance movement through divide and rule. But this is counterproductive when you're trying to find a solution. Because then what happens is you've divided the movement, you've played on the fissures, you've weakened the movement, but you've created multiple centers of power within the movement so that if you resolve the dispute A and B, C is always there to say, I don't agree with this. Same thing happened in Punjab. You signed an agreement with Gandhi, there's a map, here also. This problem keeps coming back, and I call it completely radicalism. So these are the two major problems. The Indian state is not very clear. In the early 50s and 60s, Nehru would not like to hear the concept of shared sovereignty. He wanted a centralized state because his generation has lived through the trauma of partition. Any suggestion that the center is weak, major. But then the Indian state grew in confidence, in economic confidence, in political confidence, and as my good friend G.K. Pillai has said, the same people, several years later, agreed with the concept of shared sovereignty But then again, there is a, pushback, or there is a pushback, and people are not agreeing to that. They think a stronger center is necessary. The center should have the final right to decide on the state formation. And the confusion has come back after the J&K thing. What I'm trying to say is that this swinging of pendulum at the center is also responsible that we are not being able to find a solution to the Naga problem, because certain dispensations viewed the problem in a certain way, and certain other dispensations viewed it in a different way. For some, national security was our purpose. For some other dispensation, solving this problem was our purpose. Yeah. So when the framework agreement was signed, there was an apparent zeal to show that something has been done. So you agree on shares of now that is going to be a problem, because Muiwa wants to interpret shares over as the right of the Nagas to have a constitutional flag. So we can't give to the Nagas, but we can't give to others in India, the J&K is there. So here I won't take this. If we really want to break the law and carry forward this Naga peace process, and there is an urgency to it, as I highlighted that at the beginning. We can't afford to deploy large military formations to tackle these problems. You need it elsewhere. And you also need this area to be settled, because you want to use this as a gateway to Southeast Asia and the economy. There are other problems there. Myanmar is descending into chaos, absolute civil war, and that's a huge problem. But I don't want to detail on that. Well, the point I'm trying to make is, if you really want to make a break, the Indian political class, and I'm not talking as political parties, Indian political class, people back in decision making sector, they themselves have to be clear about what you want to do. You want to play on the primary device, some interlocutor comes and gives a lot of tampering to the Indian movement, the frontier Naga tribes movement. Some others to think in India, I deal with the NSA because these guys can't be left behind. They're the strongest group, they have 6,000 fighters, so leaving them behind is risky. My point is, people in their look back who are leading the decision have to be very clear on how you want to address this problem. Unless that clarity exists at the decision making level, we can have webinars and webinars after webinars and nothing will be done. They have to resolve. Because people like me, or some others now here, they were very powerful people before, but they are retired. We don't really matter. At the end of the day, the present dispensation has to take that off. And they have to be very clear about what you are trying to do with this now. India, what is this now problem? Unless that is very clear, we are going to move around like a six blind man. Somebody touched the Naga problem, like touching the elephant at the feet and think it's a pillar. Somebody touches the tail and thinks it's a snake, and everything goes in. So it is for the Indian decision makers, people who matter to it, to be very clear how they want to look at the problem. And whether they want to resolve it or not. Because there is also a feeling, in your strategic statement, somebody said, there is also a feeling that we are moving on to voting on Chale. Isaac is gone, Weaver is also old, and these people will go, let us wait till these guys are gone. We should have waited till Jinnah passed up away, then there would be no Pakistan till this kind of logic comes back. Point is, can we afford to wait much longer in the name of strategic statement? No, we can't. Actually, the failure to find a solution to certain other issues elsewhere in India has proved to be very costly for the Indian state and for the Indian people. So, here, if we agree, number one, this whole idea got out there about this, and if we have to first agree that this problem has to be solved now. We have to do it now. This attitude, if it prevails, then we have to decide what the problem is, step by step. Is to solve the problem. Next thing is how we go about it. Whether we calculate, we leave this out. We have to figure out what the Naga problem is for the compound. And lastly, I think at the end of the day, we have to look at some of the other solutions which are working, or this like the Mizo Accord. Because I would say that lesson of that Mizo Accord was sign a deal with the entire agenda without splitting it. And therefore, the accord has worked. That lesson was carried forward in a recent Bodo Accord when there was an effort made by the interlocutor, a good friend of mine, to bring together all the diverse Bodo factions and make all of them sign the agreement so that no one can later go and say, "Hey, I didn't sign it and I have the right to carry on the armed move." So here, the tendency is that we play on the tribal divides, leave Kuiva out, discuss Afghan, bring 3 other people, these things are not going to work. You need a comprehensive settlement, you need all the factions to sign on the dotted lines. Finally, I don't really think, and shared sovereignty in a way is the basis of any good federal system. And therefore, it is not something, it's not, you don't need rocket science to understand that this large entity called India, with all its diversity and all its diverse histories, there may be an attempt to form a very centralized history concept, but it will not work. I think it should be that. Here, Nagas are unique. Everybody in India is unique. And we are different in many ways. Every province has its own tradition, culture, and they are unique. But India is a civilization state as far as I understand. Yeah, therefore, the main thing is that the Naga talks also should be seen as an opportunity to authentically federalize India at a later stage. What was the possible? But more importantly, I think what is very important here is to go ahead and find a consensus among the various factions in the entire process and then come and sign up with it. Now, how do you work out this consensus? Because there is a tendency, and I know of interlocutors who have tried to aggravate the divide, just to be nice to their own bosses. That is the idea. I'm saying this with authority because I know about this that is happening. Problem is, first you have to decide that you have to tackle the Naga problems. Number 2, you have to tackle it as a composite process and not create divisions and fissures and try to exploit something for tech. What sometimes works tactically does not work strategically. And so is you understand this. So, and in the final observation that I want to bring here is that this shared sovereignty is definitely the root of the basis of bedrock of a good federal system, which we should be. I really don't think, and I don't agree with you on this, that the Nagas need a separate costume. Flag, well, as Peter Miller said, states can have their flag, it's not a big deal, it's a thing of identity, even tribes can have their own flags, they do have that. Something for Nagaland, something for some other state, some special status can generally between people large stating constitution. So why do we need a separate constitution if we are willing to stay within India? So I really don't agree with this whole demand of a separate constitution. But yes, the Naga Council, the that cuts across different states, keeping the Naga culture, the Finnish model and all that all can be worked out. The point I'm trying to make here is Indian federation should actually reflect the spirit of India. It should reflect the accommodating spirit of Indian nationalism. That I can speak a different language and Mr. X can speak a different language and Mr. Y can speak a different language. But we can still all fight for India or cheer for India when the Indian team wins. That's the beauty of India. We can all be very different and still be one. And why is that possible? Because India is a civilization state. This unity can only be achieved through a common concept of a long historic civilization and not through 4 factors like religion, ethnicity, etc., which only divides. Yeah? So, I think this is something that the Nagas will also have to realize that their effort to create Naga nationalism, without resolving their own internal fissures and tribal identities, Naga nationalism exists. Actually, we actually create the state in some ways. That we are not as their Indians, but moment you are left to yourself, you behave like the Afghans of the East. You're not divided. So the point I'm trying to make here is to end is that there needs to be a resolution within the Naga, ambit, and also an end to the confusion, policy confusion that has existed, since the 50s with the Indian state about how to handle this Naga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. So I will please first go back to no, so we do
I will.
we will first ask panelists of question, then we move. Now, Ms. Bobby, the issue that she raised was that we cannot afford to have the army continuously deployed to deal with internal conflict situations, and the political power centers have to figure out a way of finding political solution. Even so far as economics is concerned, talking about activities is meaningless if we cannot settle the situation. No, that's not coming when you can't restore the route to the region. And then, of course, that the one of the main reasons as he sees it is the incomplete formation of sub-nationalism of the Nagas. And in fact, the identity itself is converging mainly to the conflict with the Indian state. And he gave the example of the Shillong and so on. Then he talked about the GOI, the government of India itself. It's been moving from one stand to the other. Sometimes they look at the Naga as a homogeneous unit, and sometimes it's a divide between policy. And he mentioned that this confusion is itself can become a good block in the solution. And the interesting point that he raises is that we should look at the Naga co-ops as an opportunity to explore further the concept of shared sovereignty with federal system as it is in other federal entities in the world. And finally, he mentioned that unless we have a comprehensive solution that brings all groups together, it's not going to work. That was the speakers. Now, before I move on and check, Ms. Hani, could you please check whether there are any questions in the chat box? I will ask the panelists who are sitting here if they have any questions to ask of each other. So, may I start with the excuse? In case there are any concerns that you want to show that since you are there are ideas, that there are something like shares around.
Yeah. First of all, my association with Naga problem and therefore what I say with purely from memory like that is very good. I recall 1995 when the first it's going wrong. Carrying bomb, aspiration for now that everybody is popular discussion. Now that we're all somebody talked about the issue of sun baby and mobile phones and talking about it. Already were not for aspiration to make on speed and make handling master. I want to stay here. But even still very creative monitor. I personally feel this movement can be down. It's not in the long run, which is not that we don't face and from the process that we have on this community. So Naga was particularly very exclusive in frequent beyond community. The Nagaland was the first part of the stamp which was very independent in the shortest possible. There is no other peak of that is for the Indian state by the celebrating of it. Nagaland was the first Indian territory to become a state within 4 or 5 years time. And therefore, they have been given a special treatment right from the day one. They are gradual and they have worked with people like Mahatma Gandhi down on the globe. And therefore, if they have aspirations, then any negotiation that you initiate has to be given by it. If there is no aspiration, there is no. I will share with you in this connection that we must go with our clear that we are dealing with insurgency with hope and not external people. And therefore, that particular insurgency has to be taken conditioned by patience and purpose. I never knew the Naga government Nagaland, I have indicated my dialogue with the schools from school. And I was able to cover almost all schools in this, facing the criticism that headed the VIP was founded government with a plan for intelligence subversion of us. But I never knew that people will resist my interaction with them. The SEMA Federation of students will try to organize and talking about it. And whether one would like to know there was no resistance there. While they suspected that the government had got some unpaid motives to replace from our people, we want to be in one area and we cannot be a strong partner. And today, 25 years hence, I didn't know so many things that happened. Now we have a reputation. Because in our time, we organized fashion shows, cultural shows, bar shows, conferences on HIV, the AIDS, entire gamut of social spectrum of Nagaland was under discussion. Today, I look back, there's hardly time in India, which have gone through such turmoil over the years of 75 years, it's not really. You look at the history of Nagaland. Imagine the jungle life. Nobody said they were never known as Naga. My question was never answered by any of the Naga leaders. Was Naga hills known as Naga? Or was people known as Naga? When Mr. Bhaskar came to Nagaland, for the election, we had a retail meeting midnight. What to say and what not to say. And we went to the minutest kind of clarity on nuance. What does it mean history? Naga are people quality that history is. We are talking about nationalism of not having done the cycle of the soul. We have to be defined. Even Naga for that. The last Naga, I was glad seeing Alan mentioning that we want TV care to be. Where is the question of sovereign development? And therefore, this society, what is seen today, is unbelievable. I can't believe what is happening in the ground. I cannot believe that Naga boys and girls are making areas outside. Not only the state, but different state of the state where I interact with them. That dialogue, fiction, change. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we need to show patience. We need to show the state. Yes, there is a stalemate. Any stalemate is good for demonstration. Because the stalemate gives you idea how to restart, how to repackage, and how to remark. Kind of a platform where and site station is unformed.
Now, where you are now according to my interpretation, this is the problem. You are never have to meet it before. If you really scan social media today, I wonder how many people are getting from Naga report, Naga experiment, from Naga sovereignty. Let us know my humble when there are different opinions. These four weeks of Naga what will happen. The verdict of this report and its own clear explanation. To link it with Naga, what will happen? Now, I may ask the question if court upholds that decision going on, then you have to get 10 points. So therefore, not legal the issue. The statement is that way forward, my request is that let us look way back. From where we have started and where we are today. It is not a statement, it is dynamic. We have nuances, let us bring both.
Thank you very much, sir. That's really, thank you so much. Is there anybody else on the panel who would like to ask questions of our panelists to make additional comments?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have just 2 points. For Excellency, my first teaching on Nagaland was by the Excellency. I went and called on him. Calling on was 30 minutes. I stayed for 4 hours. So you are as the first ADG of the Sunrise. And today I am hearing him again. That notwithstanding, I must give up my in the early 2000s, one went around the streets of Lima, Kohima, even Hebron. One could realize that there is not much of insurgency there. And one could see that development. It was better off than the rest of the Northeast that I could see. I have been to the Northeast. And so why this sort of insurgency? It was actually, some people told me it was more of an industry than it. Now coming to the accord, what has delayed the so-called accord? Basically, to my view, IAM's desire to gain power over the Naga tribes, and I would say the government of India's proclivity or its pension for long, drawn out articles which confuse you at the end of the reading and not anything else. The wording of today's Naga is known for development which everybody is proud of. Jobs, prosperity, and against weapons, going back to the jungles and extorting money from us. Today's Naga is not for that. One must realize this. Mr. Kurukasta and my erstwhile boss, General Mukherjee, talked about uncles, only 94% the rebels. So, if I am a correct, they form most of the leadership, not the foot soldiers as Kurukasta. The foot soldiers basically consist of mostly of soft, I would say, schema, and the aggressive out. And the only leadership that is the Brahmins of the Brahmins, that is the Thankul, they come from a place called Kuku, which is part of Mani. That is how the greater Nagaland actually came into being, and why Manipur is not ready to the greater Nagaland. Secondly, talked about shared sovereignty. We are talking about today, every day, federalism. I would request all present here and hearing me to look at the map of India as a fabric of cloth. And if you start fraying any cloth at the edges, not only has a domino effect on the other villages, the hearing is fast. So, would you like the hearing to be fast? Or would you like, okay, if we have a hole in the center, everything, yes, fast. So, my personal views on it, although first lesson from first experience, just my personal view. In fact, if you, as I agree with him on one thing, let the accord carry on. Carry on with the statement, carry on with this thing, let it carry on. Who's bothered? Ignore that. I mean, I see a lot of debates on the TV. I do not know why they call so many people on the TV and create a controversy unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Very jolly, Mukesh.
I have a number of points. When I look back, this excellency was already got to have a book with them. I was using to come with 600, all of that, and for assignment, software assignment, and they disturbed their bed of Naga, all of them. At stage, there's no information got. The guy who read Gary's game, I am council headquarters in Mumbai in 1957. Coming from Fort to directly cross country. The two brigades minus. I think overtaking that from. But there really some very heavy casualties. And sued for a state fund. And they found the state fund. And he took that secretary. Fact remains this, after that, they defected in Europe, people. And then came back to Eastern Command. I came to Eastern Command. It was 2001, 2002. Oh, yes, come. And at that stage, the ceasefire was on, and they were trying to extend the ceasefire to Manipur. I understand. Program on that. They have a lot of trouble on them. Until I want to take it. Then we want to go, once I take it, but I want to sit that one. I will ask for an interview, I will give it an interview. And I treated two mistakes. They have got it. They never really looked at it. But they extended. There was hell to pay in Manipur all along the Assam border and what a picture that. And then, yes. We should take a decision now in terms of the accord on that side. You go, okay, yeah, literally this. Then I come on to what has really disturbed people all over the region. Well, that is. So I spent a lot of time in the office. People ask me point blank, how can we trust Delhi? They moved Article 370, tomorrow they will move Article 371, they will move to 6 champion of the Constitution. They're not to be trusted. That has become the biggest stumbling point of the accord. That is the biggest stumbling point. Now you have to build that trust deficit to resolve the accord. Not only that, the Chinese have already started catering. So you've got NSC and IM charters already sitting in Roorkee. Yeah. They're already sitting and waiting in case you go against them. They've got charters safe across the board. So, these are things everybody knows on ground. The only people who don't know it is the people on ground. Who are on the ground. What I am saying is, number 1 point. Number 1 point. Number 2 point is the resolution of the accord. It took America 200 years to build a nation. As I told you, in 1960, when I put on uniform, and I was in the Northeast, I still saw headhunting on. It's a long time to build a nation. But here you try your hand at nation building. So, while religion has to a certain extent built up a so-called Naga nation, certain extent, not fully done. It would need, I think, 50 years more. So where is the hurry? I don't know. I disagree with you, Shubhi. Where is the hurry? You go to China. The policeman was the call. You need economics. I said, build up a trust and use economics to develop trust. Said Naga that today Dimapur is like the trust of peace. Now, get after the areas which are not developed. Do the same thing there. One, twin side, Manipur. Even in far than I mentioned last year. Development is tremendous in the park. So, it's all the areas. Whether we like it or not, you can't remove the feeling of clans. You look at the Scottish in England, still traveling for take us away from England, give us. And Gates Singh rightly said, we want identity. Identity comes language from culture. So build that up. And nation building. The same applies to the nation of India. Think about that. Build ourselves up as a nation. These are quite simple. I just wanted to say one thing. Those of you who are online, we were talking Chatham House rules. We give you our word of honor that no names will be divulged in our final report to anyone. So please feel free to ask any question you want or say anything you want. Nothing will go.
Is anybody on the panel, either sitting here or colleagues online, would like to ask questions of any of the panel members? I will also ask for the chat box if anything. Actually, you might check in from the chat box if any questions and if we can. Yeah, first, Mr. Bobby.
Liverpool Rams of the East. Liverpool Rams of the East. The statement. Check into my old BBC boss and I am a director of community. Any conflict, you should follow the money you have. Where is this money come from? Is it out of any part of industrial activity? Any genuine economic activity? It is either corruption money which Indian government has put into its economic system and has been siphoned out by corrupt bureaucrats, politicians, and many stories of corruption in Naga. Even the chief minister people fight. That's what. Secondly, it's also an insurgency. Look at the compound villas in Europe. Look at all the major hotels which have come up, and I know because I'm deep penetration into that damn society. You know, who has got their money from where, which many others don't. This is insurgency money. This money comes from the gates where the extortion goes on, despite the ceasefire monitoring itself in full motion. The soldiers come the other way, the NSQ takes it money. And this money comes. That is why you have Isaac Sissu and Naga, shareholders of a South African company. Okay? So I don't want to go into these details, but I think I have enough inputs on how these places become the bellies of the East. It's not due to any proper economic activity. Okay? It's very, very distorted economy that is informal economy of a very dangerous kind, which hides on conflict. If conflict is not there, Naga will so much money flow from Delhi for these kind of purposes and will be siphoned out by bureaucrats and many, many other people involved. Yeah. And also like research. They are all products of this, conflict. That's number one. I am beginning to suspect, which I've made in my call, all this variety of strategies can be made. Things can go on. I just draw the attention of my revered seniors here to what happened to Babri Masjid because of Narasimha Rao's decision to carry on with his puja and not actually try to do something to stop this whole thing from going over. Strategic stalemate, which is sometimes the other name of do nothing and wait and watch, can be very dangerous. The China factor, which was one, I have some definite inputs, and I have reasons to believe that the Chinese state, if the conflict with India at the rates, they will be willing to play a Northeast card as we are willing to play the Indian card, right? This is based on my thesis of insurgent crossfire, which is tackling. So, if you don't resolve these issues to the satisfaction, it cannot be 100% satisfaction, but to the satisfaction of most of these battling ethnicities or nationalities, then you are leaving behind issues which can grow over. And as I said in the beginning, I insist there is a timeline, every conflict, after which we can take very distorted trust. The original idea with which a fight started, let us say the Nagas, we want independence. It has run its own course. Today it can take very distorted forms. It can take very different and distorted forms. And it can be exploited by enemies of India. And China is not, China is not modest. I take China very, very seriously. Yeah.
Why don't you research and discuss what would be the distorted form of revival of Naga?
Okay, I'll give you one instant example. I have seen some rebel armies in Myanmar. Myanmar is not very far off from Naga. Insurgent armies. Like Punjab created his Mongtai army, 8,000 guerrillas under arms. Okay? In military terms, almost 2.5 brigades, if not 3, right? Now, with all these Burmese governors, especially those who have been eased out or pushed out of the Golden Triangle by the bigger ones, there's constant fight. Some of the bigger governors like Mongtai, now the ones, they pushed out some of the smaller governors and they have relocated themselves on the India-Myanmar border. I can give you exactly. Will you tell us? Oceanian, Anjani. These are the 3 big countries. And some of them enjoy the trust of corrupt Burmese military officers. Therefore, from the headquarters of the 33rd Light Infantry Battalion in Colorado, hardly 500 meters you have a drug processing level. I have pictures of it. Because I have deep sources inside my. What I'm trying to make here is that if these guys in future create armies which are driven or which are motivated purely with the idea of backing the drug trade, and it's possible. It's possible. This drug trade is very dangerous. They can even subvert people in uniform. We know the case of the Lieutenant Colonel Chaudhary, the army here, who was caught with so many drugs in his gypsy. So, without elaborating, this is one of the major discussions. Now, this kind of insurgent movement is nothing to do with independence authority. It's all driven by a particular criminal activity. These kind of activities that fall. Secondly, we have already seen how the Chinese play. When we allowed them visa on arrival in India, and we made this announcement. It has been followed by an avalanche of Chinese investors who have come to create the low lab scan. Look at the level of the low lab scan. If you think a low lab scan is all about sending out money to borrowers and then forcing them to repay, I can also think that these low labs which the Chinese are operating in India, given intelligence services, can also be the platform for extensive espionage activities, funding espionage, extensive espionage. So there are multiple threats to national security which can emerge if these kind of problems are left unattended. Therefore, I have great reservations where strategic stalemate is often interpreted as wait and watch, do nothing, and just wait. No, okay. But some definite effort, if there is no definite effort to resolve the crisis, then they have this government to try to secure.
So, are you online? Mr. Kumar Pillai? Mr. Jamil? Sir, we'd like, having heard everyone speak, would you like to make any remarks, observations?
First of all, I must say that the audio quality is so poor that about 75% of what was said I could not hear. I twice or thrice I had sent messages. I could just make out what Alam said, that the Nagas are ready to sign a peace settlement at any cost. I don't know whether that would solve the issue or not. You can leave NSA and IM out and sign with everybody else if they don't sign, and hope that peace will prevail. If that is what he says, good luck. The government can go ahead and try with that. I think it's very important to build trust and try and have a settlement with everybody. Because today with Myanmar and Bangladesh both becoming sensitive areas for India, and of course our northern neighbor China always willing and to create trouble. And I expect definitely that in the next couple of years there will be another, I think, a major border skirmish coming up, because that is what clearly the what Z talked about in the Congress, Communist Party Congress. So we have to be extremely careful, and we have to make sure that our internal, we don't have any problems internally which will create a problem for us to be able to defend our borders. Having said this, I think with the fact that the peace has held, violence has come down drastically, hardly any except for a few incidents here and there. I think it is a good time for us to be able to push for a settlement. I think the R.N. Ravi's statements as Governor Nagaland, when he was the interlocutor, was quite ill-advised and created the bitterness which finally led to the government of India having to remove him. But I think the basic groundwork is there. There is a lot of public support. We have to translate that public support into what I call as the peace accord with the details, because it is in the details that people will say, okay, we've negotiated with respect, we've got an honorable settlement, and now we can leave the past behind and go ahead. Otherwise, what will happen is, if you don't have what I call as a settlement with honor and respect, then you will find that, like in the past, you will find you had the Shillong Accord, you had the 63 Accord, 16-point agreement, etc. You keep having agreements, but there will always be a group which will then go and create problems, and we don't want that to happen. That is what my real issue is. I think we have to focus a lot of attention from the government of India side, and I think I have no doubt that if the political will is there to find a solution, I think you can find a solution within 3 months. The basic groundwork is all laid for that. I think it's just 3 months of talks at the political level. I don't think really at bureaucratic level there are the talks. I mean, that period is over. It's a political level talk that you should be held and finalized, and that can be done within 3 months.
Mr. Jamil?
Yeah, over.
General Paisana? Any closing comments or observations would you like to make after having heard everybody else? Could you unmute yourself, please?
Audio is not clear. I can't make out.
General, can you hear me? Are there any more questions? All right. So, yeah, this is a good question.
Yeah. So how Nagaland has developed over the years, and Naga boys working outside Nagaland. But when we talk about Nagaland, we limit ourselves to Yoguru and Kohima. Has this development gone to Sanatha? Has it reached how many, human youngs boy we find working in, say, Calcutta or Bangalore or this thing? And forget about outside Nagaland. What is the percentage of these tribal boys in government job in Naga? Actually, and those who are there, it's the 4th grade, yeah, the person, you understand about 4th grade jobs, they are okay. And again, when we talk about Nagas outside Nagaland, we just limit ourselves to that. What about the Arams, the Marams, the Jemis, the Tiki, the Tamsas? Could you, are they, included in the development process? I have, have, this, have they benefited from the solar development taking place in Nagaland or Manipur? I remember one incident when it was in 2000, I think, just ahead of Manipur election. It was, I think, Sonia Gandhi was to, address a public meeting in Tamengang, and a whole lot of press was taken to Tamengang. And when we reached there, we found the circuit house was entirely occupied, and there was not a single hotel where the press could be put up. And we were having into a voice hostel, which was empty because of the election. The school had declared holidays, and we were asked to stay there in a hostel where there were only this bed but no call. So we had to somehow manage in that hostel. So where the infrastructure? Somebody was talking about tourism development, Hornbill Festival. Other day, a group from Kolkata wanted to visit Saramati. There was hardly any this thing apart from few homestays. There were hardly any infrastructure for the tourists to put up there. And Saramati is one of the most scenic place in Nagaland. So these this development, Dimapur becoming Paris, and these are very limited development. We have to take forward this route of development. We have to carry it forward to remote places, that in the fringes, Unless that is done, this kind of peaceful development will never bring lasting peace. Thank you.
Can you say that what? Help us, sir? I see anything.
Yeah, but now nobody is there. Only election.
All right, so essentially, we have gone for the online. I would like to, I think, is there any of technique of Jen Maksakali still wants to highlight performance?
No, sir, not yet.
Not, all right. I know connectivity is always important. So essentially, we come to the end of discussion. Very, very interesting issues have come up. It talks about what they call supremacy laws in the US, where many of the states have a separate flag and even separate constitution. But the constitution of the United States, the federal government, that of course is supreme. That any law, any clause in the constitution of the states cannot supersede that of the United States. Similarly, in India itself, you have the SR online in India, the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court had that stages and had given a ruling that there is no prohibition in the constitution to separate. I would like to ask Mr. Jami, he had talked about freedom, all the Naga about freedom. So Article 371A, if you read the text itself, it's quite comprehensive, but as was mentioned by several speakers, maybe the concern is that whether this will be forever and ever, or whether it can be removed at any time. Or we should talk about identity and territory. So what as far as concerned, from the time of the announcement, recently there was a lot of celebrations for the announcement.
Really much.
In Rasi. Actually, you have cognacs and owls. What we are rulers against the invading rulers. So there are old ties, sometimes more, sometimes less. Even I know from when the estates were there, the parts were given, there was always a market to help the planters clear the forest. So there has been these today it's a different kind of relationship, and if all these different states, they have been old civilization started because they were going forward with the money invasion took place from Burma. Where did the try to make it hopefully. I think all of us, I try very hard to get people from the younger generation now that participate in this. And maybe because I come up with some of the Oxford, someone to be somewhere else, I couldn't get the people who that we used to be here. Most of us here, I think, have seen the TV serial Mahabharata. And if you remember, the director there is kind. As they say. And we remember in the deep voice, it men's way home. And essentially, what we ask is to give the courage to change changing times. There, I think, whether it is the leaders who are leading the talks, whether it is from this side, the question for us is given the courage to change the changing times. I must thank all the panelists for their free and frank discussions. Now I will hand over to Edith Marshall Naga, who will speak as President of Senate.
And good afternoon, everyone. My special and warm greetings to all the eminent panelists, the keynote speaker, the Secretary, Shri Pillai, former Governor of Nagaland, Sri Shyam Datta, other dignitaries, military serving as well as federal officers, as I had, and of course, distinguished guests who are either online or offline present for this seminar. Well, I think this has been a wonderful seminar, perhaps one of the best so far, organized by Sinner State, with the strategic think tank based in Kolkata, all last years. And having heard all the professionals on the subject, who are from various backgrounds and from various walks of life, listening to the perspectives given by strategic analysts, leaders from the military, police, administrative services, media, and of course, lawyers and academia, I think now I feel that I have everything to add to the deliberations as gone on for the last 2 hours plus. This discussion or deliberation have been all encompassing, and I think all the facets of the Naga issue have been discussed in great details. Be it all the facets, be it geographical, historical, cultural, developmental, economic, all the issues have been discussed in great details in threadbare, and of course, the brilliant panelists have actually been very, very incisive in giving us their views, their observations, and also solutions to the Naga issue. So I am at least, I'm sure all of us are more knowledgeable and more enlightened on the Naga issue, and I'm sure Naga Accord would be signed sooner than later, especially in the light of the elections, the state elections that will take place in Nagaland next year, early months of next year, 2023. I have no experience
of being in Nagaland, but I have some stories to tell. In my service career, I've never had the opportunity to serve in Nagaland and many other states of northeastern region. Besides Nagaland, I have gone to Mizoram, Tripura, Manipur. Though I have visited officially or otherwise, the state of Meghalaya, and I have very good knowledge of the people there and the problems there, as also Assam, where I was posted to Deshpur for 2 years, flying as a pilot in the MiG conversion unit, and also having flown to the entire region, especially the Himalayas and the tropical forests that is in the adjoining areas. I actually have visited Arunachal Pradesh several times. I'm going to tell you this anecdote mainly because I think development, economic development, is the biggest issue of settling any friction in the society, interstate relations, or the state versus Indian government. So I was there last time in 2013 and as the vice chief of the air staff to go and monitor the upgrade and reconstruction of advanced landing grounds in Arunachal Pradesh. 8 of them. There are a lot of problems in trying to get hold of the land, to develop the ALGs, a lot of problems in convincing the people that please leave the encroachment that you've done on the government land. We'll develop this place for you to get jobs, economic development, improve connectivity, have tourism flourish, and it will help you. So these people were convinced, and I personally was involved. And within a few years' time, with the government support, the local people's support, the administration support, all these 8 advanced landing grounds were prepared, reconstructed, improved in terms of infrastructure and facilities for fixed wing operations. And of course, helicopter operations was obviously very clear. So this has improved everything, the economic activity, the connectivity, and also the military capability of Indian armed forces. In this sector, which in my mind is broader than many or many sectors from China. And if we don't develop these areas, both in terms of economic terms, connectivity, and military terms, we will be in the So that is my story about the northeastern region, the various states. And I said that development is the main thing in solving issues and problems. I've also mentioned the personal time with the Naga. And I said, Naga, but this goes back to 1960. In 1965, I joined science school Purulia, West Bengal. In January 1965, when I joined there, we had about 230 odd students. And I found more than 30 students who were from Naga boys. It was very surprising to me at that time. But I found that Naga boys were excellent friends, very jovial, very interesting, and they enjoyed music, dance, etc., and cultural activity. And they're very, very exceptional in outdoors like athletics, football, and boxing. So we used to cheer them in all their bouts and competitions. I found them with exceptional friends. Many of them were very good in studies. They used to rank the first 3 in their class, but some were not available. And that is part of the story. Any clan, any tribe, any area, any society, I would say.
One people.
I'm going to cover that. Okay. Even the boys are basically from clans like Sema, Angami, Konyak. Is it Konyak? My pronunciation will not be correct. Zamir, Haranu. Haranu was 3 years senior. And she was the best athlete and sports person in Sunday school.
So now we are not in he was a brilliant scholar, MD, and he held the record for 100 meter sprint for many years, which is very, very credible because NDA has got added for it. And most of this, all this understand that every time these boys went home on summer vacation or winter vacation, they brought back products. One thing I liked was the Thai beef chilies. It was full of chilies, it was very difficult to eat, but it was so tasty. And whenever they offered to me, I had this now. That is one thing I can talk about. And all these people, especially from the district did exceptionally well. Many joined the armed forces. Many became, bureaucrats. One of the secretaries, the chief secretary of Nagaland was the best. And the CM of Nagaland was also from his school, and perhaps he's still the CM. If I'm not wrong. Yes, it's from my school. Right, but he's my junior, I didn't meet. So they have become doctors, engineers, bureaucrats, politicians. And I think that is the government in India, which is consistent for the last 5 to 6 decades, that we need to be all inclusive. We need to mainstream the people from the Marxist region, especially Nagaland, where there are secessionist movements, so that they become artists. I think it has succeeded to a very large extent. And we should actually vigorously follow this policy to mainstream them, and they will love reading. Now, let me now summarize some of the issues which have been highlighted by the analysts, because I have nothing more to say actually. So, Naga insurgency is the oldest insurgency in India. It started with the Dutch time, and it is the legacy. It is a legacy of the British rule of the colonial era. There are many groups, many clans, many ethnicities all across the northeastern region, and obviously in Nagaland. And if I'm not wrong, in Nagaland there are more than about 25 or ethnic groups, and all these groups and tribes have very strong affiliation, loyalties to their tribe. So main problem in my mind has been competition in insurgency situation amongst the various tribes. In any revolution, in any insurgency, it's always the hardliners who win, initiate, later they lose. So that is what's been happening, and that's why all the interlocutors, all the peace effort, peace talks, to my mind, as military man, failed. Because it was very difficult to get so many factions of Naga ethnicity together on one platform and agree on a common mission. This is my impression, from a governor who know better than I on this aspect. Right. So, in 1947, when India obtained independence, Mr. Fizo, one of the big leaders of the Naga movement, declared independence, secession from India, and that's when the Indian army got involved, inducted, along with the central forces, central police forces, I would say, to quell this, secessionist movement or insurgency. And that's how the Armed Forces Act sort of was gave special not being for the army. So that was enacted and made applicable. So, right. So that is one thing. And the main issues in my mind, which all of us highlight, or the speakers highlight, is that sovereignty is not negotiable. Though people talk about shared sovereignty, in my mind, our constitution is one of the best in the world. It actually caters for federalism, So shared sovereignty is not clear to me. This concept is already there. Enshrined in the Indian Constitution. We have state list, we have central list, we have concurrent list, we have powers to the local states. Elections are held independently. The MLAs operate independently of governments. They act their rules, even with the state, they govern the state. Certain things happen within the Constitution of India. You cannot have external affairs, you cannot have security relations with the state, you cannot have overall economic progress and schemes work out individually. It has to be centrally driven. So these are the issues in my mind. It's not, to my mind, I'm not very clear what shared of this sovereignty, which already exists in our constitution. Having a separate constitution, to my mind, is once again not possible. It's not negotiable. You cannot have a separate constitution within the Indian constitution. And third, the flag, I think it's not an issue. Flags the state can have, but it cannot replace the nation. But more importantly, and most sensitive issue, as was discussed, is the demand for better Naga land, which in my mind, even the rebel leaders, insurgency leaders also understand that by trying to include within the Naga land various areas in the neighboring states with large number of Naga people there, in terms of greater Naga land, will douse one fire. But it will give rise to many fires and should engulf the entire northeastern region in terms of violence and disturbance and peace being shattered, that it is not possible for the Indian government to accept this greater Naga land concept. But to my mind, the main challenge of the Indian nation, Indian government, the bureaucrats and the military is the China factor. Very in detail, because China will continue to be a huge threat for India, and they do not consider India to be friendly, nor do they consider India to be their peers. They don't want to sit across the table, high table, where they are there, they're not like the Indians. So they have this danger for India, and they are already working towards putting India into blood. So it is a challenge for the government, diplomats and the military to make sure that the Chinese assistance in terms of shelter, money, weapons, training, etc. Is brought to a halt. And also the ISI activities has to be contained in it. Of course, Bangladesh at times have been playing other games, especially whenever there was military there. So that also is being catered for. So a diplomatic initiative itself is going to contain things. And whatever military is required, they should take it on like they did across the Myanmar border, which is actually tropical forest, thick tropical forest. It is totally, I would say, porous, and it's very difficult to have control over the Indian land or Myanmar's land. So all these groups, they find shelter there and operate more or less. So that is another challenge for me. I think there are some issues about insurgency being sustained by this. Very relevant point in my mind, and I also know, having heard a lot of people earlier, that a lot of funding is given by the central government for development, for the structure, facilities, so that the standard of living goes up, standard of life also improves. But most of these projects do not take off in the right direction because there's a lot of leakage or seepage and a lot of corruption, and all the monies, most of the monies, funds are being garnered by the vested interest, powerful, including politicians. And of course, if there is insurgency, it is possible to orchestrate extortion, which was highlighted by Mr. Kwame. It's an industry, I believe, there, as I heard, and it is controlled by criminal elements. So these issues have to be taken care of by the Indian nation.
As far as the remedies are concerned, I think we need to reduce the presence of the armed group. Right? Armed cannot really give a solution. So there has to be progressive withdrawal of the army and more of central police forces, state police forces, go this region and law and order, etc., as well as insurgency. And I think, AFSPA needs to be removed progressively, which is already started, or we have to dilute it. But armed forces should not be involved in, law and order problems. Second, developing infrastructure, like I mentioned about Arunachal Pradesh, that this infrastructural projects have to be monitored by central government agencies, through central government I would say agencies to develop this. If the funds are given to the state, rest assured not the 50% will be utilized towards the intended purpose. And third is that when the schemes need to be started, I'm not sure it's already there or not, while the benefits should go directly to the individuals. I think the central government should target the women and the economically weaker sections, where funds be given directly to their accounts. Students who require help for studies, etc., they should give them funds directly to their accounts and not to the government or any other agency. To my mind, this is my wish. And of course, mainstreaming of the people, Nagaland or marginalized people from northeastern region is very important. The example I gave you of school, that continues vigorously at the Indian state and there are a lot of issues. So, because economic development, the main criteria for getting jobs, improvement in the quality of life and standard of living, and automatically we would like to preserve the peace and not anchor after certain insurgencies which are not productive. And nobody also get involved in criminal activities to earn their living. So let's give that opportunity as a state of living. So at the end, I would like to express my gratitude to the Eastern Command, Fort Williams, especially the Army Commander, and and the Chief Engineers Branch of Eastern Command for providing us this facility for successful conduct of the seminar. And also, as the President of CNSK, I would like to thank all the esteemed speakers and panelists and other distinguished people who attended today's hybrid seminar webinar. CNSK. I'd like to thank Johnny Mukherjee, the Senior Vice President, founding member of CNSK, for having taken all the initiative and worked very hard to take this seminar a success. And I think heavily assisted by former DGP, and also Mukherjee, and his team for the members. Then let me convey my warm greetings for the end of the year festivities, 25th of December, as well as the Christmas Eve, as well as New Year's, to all of you and your families. Thank you. Jai. I don't have hardly.